Realidad del Muro, a bilingual podcast where we dive into muralism and public art, getting to know it on a deeper level as we learn about the people and the stories behind the works. I'm your host, Shannon McAvoy, recording from Santiago, Chile. Back in May, I had the honor of interviewing the glamorous and very accomplished Robyne Robinson. Robyne is a creative powerhouse for positive social change, a champion of the arts and of her community. She lived in my hometown of Minneapolis, Minnesota for over 20 years, where she was an Emmy-winning news broadcaster before becoming a creative entrepreneur. Robyne has done so many incredible things across several different fields, and I don't want to risk leaving anything out in my introduction, so I'm going to read a bit from the About section on Robyne's website for her public art consulting company, fiveXfive. Here we go. Robyne has had a commanding presence in the Minnesota arts community as an entrepreneur, advocate, journalist, designer, and consultant. During her tenure as art director and fiveXfive consultant at Minneapolis-St International Airport, Minnesota received more than $5 million in arts commissions for performances, displays, and art installations created by Minnesota and Upper Midwest artists. Her curation work in public performance and visual arts garnered praise from the New York Times, Forecast Public Art, and from international travel bloggers, who in 2017 proclaimed the MSP Terminal 2 one of the 12 most beautiful terminals in the world, because of her focus on promoting local and regional artists. Robyne created an Emmy-winning platform for Minnesota arts during her years as a TV news anchor reporter that garnered interest from news outlets like the BBC and Variety. She also made financial education and business development in the arts one of her key initiatives as a 2010 candidate for Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota. She owned and curated Flatland, an award-winning contemporary art gallery featured in esteemed art publications such as Art News and Juxtapose. She also created Exhibit, a curatorial collaborative that also sponsored microloans to artists. Robyne has served on numerous art boards, including the Walker Art Center, Minneapolis College of Art and Design, MCAD, and the Minnesota Museum of American Art, where she served as board chair. She is also a University of Minnesota Hubert Humphrey Public Policy Fellow who traveled to New Zealand and Australia with the Humphrey Institute to participate in national talks on reparations to the Indigenous people of both countries. Robyne has been a respected jewelry designer for more than a decade. Her Rocks jewelry design is sold by shopping networks, major department stores, and museums such as the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Plains Art Museum, Lewis Museum of Maryland, the Walker, and the Minneapolis Institute of Art. Robyne is also a freelance writer for Artful Living and Art of the West magazine. So Robyne is a force to be reckoned with. I'm so excited to share our conversation with you today, where you'll get to learn more about Robyne's life and many of her projects, in particular her public art consulting firm, fiveXfive. So without further ado, let's have a listen. All right, so hello again, Robyne. Thank you so much for being a guest on our podcast. It's truly an honor to have you on here. You are such a distinguished guest. You are so accomplished in so many areas. It was so fun for me to do research preparing for our interview, and I'm just really excited to get to know you a bit more. And I'm sure our listeners will be very interested in what you have to say too. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm super flattered that you invited me on your podcast. This is exciting for me too. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for all those lovely compliments. It's just, when you're determined and you see things, you just put your mind to doing them, and you do them. That's really it.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I love that. Well, and so Could you maybe we could start if you could tell us like a little bit about yourself and just like a brief introduction of like kind of where you're from and
Sure.
maybe a little bit of starting to get into your journey into art perhaps as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it really does start from my family. I have a family that
Yeah.
one part was arts and one part was education and one part was politics. So
Okay.
all those things kind of combined. I always had a love of art. Growing up in a family of artists, my uncle studied at the Chicago Art Institute and then wound up becoming special events planner for Chicago Public Schools. And another art uncle was an artist in his own. He hung out with the guys from Earth, Wind, and Fire. And then my
Oh.
parents, uh, although they were both in education and politics during the 70s, it was very politically active in Chicago. I think people do remember hearing about the 68 Democratic Convention and Mayor
Mm.
Daley in Chicago and Bobby Seale and um, Abby Hoffman and all those players back from the early 70s. And my parents were very involved in that scene. So we always had,
Hmm.
people that were politically active in the house. My mom's baby sister married into the Nation of Islam, and her husband was best friends with Malcolm X. And then they would invite
Mm.
people over, and so we'd have these big gatherings. But artists were always part of it. So it
Okay.
was either somebody like Oscar Brown Jr. or Judy Pace, or and they'd sing or perform from their latest play, or plays that were going on from at that point. I think it was Mickey Hughes or Mickey Wright. She wrote "Don't Bother Me, I Can't Cope." So they would do all kinds of things. Uh, it was just a very political, fertile time, and I think I bounced around with a lot of ideas. First
Hmm.
my folks wanted me to be a lawyer. That was just dull. I was
Yeah.
not interested in that in any way. But I was
Hmm.
always interested in art, and
Mm.
eventually, they kind of laid it out for me. We weren't rich. They
Mm.
they just said, we can't afford to send you both to school, and one goes to a really expensive school and one goes to a state school. And so,
Mhm.
they kind of broke it down to me and said, this is how much it's going to be if you want to go to a really good school. And I got accepted to Dartmouth, and I wanted to go into art history, and and they're
Yeah.
just like, it's not feasible. So I stayed close to
Mm.
home, and I fell in love, surprisingly, with something that I thought was a little bit artistic and
Mhm.
also uh, current events, the days. In fact, you had to be kind of like a master of knowledge of so many different trivia and factual information, a factotum, I
Mhm.
guess, to be exact for the exact word. But I fell in love with
Mhm.
journalism, and I fell in love with
Mm.
broadcasting because when
Mm.
you really think about it, TV news is kabuki theater. I mean, it really is this theater
Oh.
of the absurd. And so I just really kind of gravitated towards that because it told what was happening in the world in a really interesting way to me. And it was the early 70s, and women were just really coming into the workforce in a powerful way. And so
Mhm.
you had these representations of young women that were on the network programs, and then they looked like me. And
Yeah.
that was still new. I mean, I don't know if you've ever heard these stories, but
Mhm.
Oprah has talked about, if
Mhm.
you saw a black person on TV when I was growing up, you
Yeah.
called over the fence and you called on the phone and you said, there is a black woman singing and dancing on TV. Turn the TV
Wow.
on, and
Wow.
so, that was powerful to me, but to not just see
Definitely.
women of color in the arts, but to see a black woman in command behind an anchor desk solo,
Mm.
delivering the news in an authoritative way, in a professional way, but in a theatrical way at the same
Mhm.
time. And it was just powerful to me. And so that's really how I started. I started in a career of journalism and broadcasting, but uh, during that journey,
Mhm.
really had to do some soul searching as to who I was in that profession and what that profession really meant to me. And
Sure.
working at that time, TV was a very different animal than what it is now. They had consultants and people that changed your hairstyle, changed your makeup, changed the way you spoke.
Oh.
I remember laying on the floor and doing breathing exercises with one coach.
Oh,
and
that's
they,
cool though.
it's
But
weird.
or
It's like
I
I
was
said,
weird.
this
Okay,
weird,
never
surreal,
mind.
bizarre
Okay.
theater, you know?
Okay, never. Okay.
So one day I was just sitting on the set and I had been poked and prodded enough and,
Mm, mm,
constantly worried, am I going to keep my job? And finally I just said, I have to do it the way I want to do it. And just
okay.
my personality came out, which is a little
Mhm,
sarcastic, a little flip. And, I really like to be in the mix. And so I really like to know a community that I'm in. And that comes from my dad being a politician, my mother being an
mhm,
educator. You have to be with people, you have to show them a way and provide opportunities for them to get their foot in the door. And so
mm,
that's how I looked at TV. I enjoyed it, but something was missing. And then a producer came to me and he said, I want to do arts and entertainment. And I said, yeah,
mm,
that sounds good. I'd like to do that too. Something to make me different from the other anchors. And
mhm,
so we started this short segment called The Buzz, and it
mhm,
was just all local arts and entertainment coverage. And we decided locally because in the Twin Cities where I worked, and I worked in a number of places, but the Twin Cities is where I spent the most time of my career and I think was
mhm,
most impactful. Uh,
mhm,
we really wanted to focus on the Twin Cities because the Twin Cities is an amazing arts community. It has the
mm,
Walker Arts Center. It has Minneapolis Institute of Art and the Minnesota Museum of Art, the Maritime Museum. You can go hear music 360 days a year. And it's the home of people like Prince, like Husker Du, like Golden Smog, Lizzo, Atmosphere, all these people that called Minneapolis home.
mm.
It's you can see them out buying bread at the grocery store, and then they're jamming later that night someplace in a bar, testing out new music. The theater
Yeah.
scene, Sir Tyrone Guthrie created the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis with Hume Cronin and Jessica Tandy. So, I mean, you've got these powerhouses of arts and culture. And so we focused on arts and culture exclusively. And it wound up
Mm.
winning Emmys and being
Yeah.
quoted in Variety magazine and hip hop magazines all across the country. And the
Yes.
BBC picked us up for a lot of the coverage that we
Amazing.
did. So we really became an important tool in the community. And I always felt that when you take from a community like that, you have to give something back. So I opened an art gallery called Flatland.
Mhm,
And yeah, it was really just this little tiny gallery. The neighborhood business association didn't want me there,
oh, no.
so no, they didn't. They're just like, no, we don't want our gallery. I mean, it was a neighborhood full of bars, basically.
Okay, okay.
So it was like these historical bars that the kids like to go to. Some of them were piano bars, like Nye's, and they could go and sing, or there was a polka band, and these places were
Mhm,
still doing these things, in the early '90s.
yeah.
So, I wanted to be close to where that environment was, but this was probably the most affordable place to open a gallery. But they didn't want it, and so we struck a deal that I would keep bar hours for my art gallery. So we were open to 2 in the morning selling art. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's a great you found a compromise that way.
Yeah, it was really successful because we focused mainly on young people that were
Mhm,
just coming into their spending power. They're in their first or
mm,
second leap in their job and their career.
mhm,
A lot of the families in the Twin Cities were arts families with big names like the Daytons and the Cargills and the
mm.
Nelsons that owned the Radisson's hotels.
Oh,
But
okay.
now
Mhm,
their grandkids were starting to
mhm,
come into the
mhm,
social political world, and so they wanted art, but they didn't have any money. So I kind of figured my art gallery should cater to the young who are really interested in art. Minnesotans really had a need to feel that they had to have art around them all the time. They're very lucky people, very
mhm.
educated people, about 32 universities and colleges in Minnesota. So their
Mhm.
appreciation of the arts and culture was very strong, and they wanted it around them all the time. So why not provide it to them as they are starting to develop in their careers and starting to collect? And
Mhm.
it was very successful. I'm very proud of Flatland. Uh, uh, but we were like right when 9/11 happened.
Oh, yes, like, so yeah, it was from 2000 to 2003, right? Right
Right.
in that was right in the middle of that.
And that was
Mhm.
right when I opened my gallery. And,
Mm.
we were doing great. I mean, we were doing tons of business, and then 9/11 happened, and I consulted with a lot of friends in the arts industry, and they're like, "You can get out, get out now, come back.
Mm.
You can do this another time, but don't do it now because no one's going to buy art." And that's what happened. The economy
Mm.
dried up. Art is the
Mm.
first thing that they're not going to buy. They're going to keep to the essentials. We're going to need groceries and need school money,
Mm.
you know, get dinner
Did
on
you
the table.
notice?
That's, yeah,
Yes,
so
mhm. So you noticed that you noticed that a bit in the end, or was that just an idea that some people had that you didn't see very much?
I think, we saw a lot of galleries fold during that
Okay.
time.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, but there are a lot of interesting pop-up galleries that were happening that I sort of aligned myself or put myself between the serious galleries and the young new galleries, the emerging galleries,
Okay.
because the emerging galleries were really what was happening, and they didn't really
Yeah.
need a lot of money to be run. And I kind of wanted to
Perfect.
stay next to what was current, but
Mhm.
also stay connected to the folks who were connected to the museums. So during that time,
Yeah.
I joined a lot of arts boards and
Yes.
kept the gallery very visible. We did
Perfect.
really a lot of novel marketing
Mhm.
for the gallery. We did a show for this young lady named Siddiqui Ray, and she's a photographer, and she did
Mhm.
nudes. So we printed all our invitations on condoms.
That's creative. That's creative.
We had
Yeah,
lots of
I love
different
it.
ideas. We either printed them on rubber bands or old,
Yeah,
like movie slides or,
that's
all
great.
kinds of different things. So we got a reputation for our
Mm,
merchandise that we had for exhibits.
perfect.
And so
Yeah.
it attracted the newspapers and
Uh-huh.
uh, almost got me fired from my job in TV. But
Oh no. Because you were running this on the side while you were still working as an anchor.
right,
Okay.
right.
Yeah.
But the arts, our art segment, the buzz was really the hottest thing that was on the air in terms of letting people know what was happening in their own community. So it really, to
Hmm.
me, was like a natural thing to do, and that the
For sure.
station should have seen that it was a boon for our viewing audience. But I think the condoms kind of freaked them out a little bit.
I can see that. I can see that. Ah, well, and also, so you also have your own jewelry line, which is something that you started building in those around those years, I believe, right?
I started letting people know that I made
Uh-huh.
jewelry. I had a very creative mother, and she was a
Hmm.
teacher. Um, education was really important to them, and so my mom and dad sent us to very expensive schools. And
Mm.
it's very hard sometimes when you're friends with these kids, but you don't have the background financially that they have.
Mm.
And we would come home and say, this girl's having a party, this girl's having a bar mitzvah, this girl's doing this. I got to have a gift for this, and this, and I got to have an outfit, and la la. And
Hmm.
she could have been like any parent and just said, we don't have that kind of money, and that can challenge a child's worth, and
Yeah.
self-image. But she never do
Yeah.
that. She just go, oh, okay, and that's all she would say. And then the weekend would
Mm.
come, and she'd say, let's go to the bead store. And so we
Hmm.
get in the car and we go to the bead store and we'd start making things. And then she'd go, you could make that for your girlfriend's party. So she was always
Mm.
inspiring. She never said no. She never said we
Yeah.
can't. She
Yeah.
gave us opportunities to find creative ways to
Mm.
interact. And so, we take our little gifts off, but it also did something really special for my mother. And
Mm-hmm.
when she would come to pick us up from these incredible townhouse city apartments or some big house out in the suburbs, and the
Mm-hmm.
mothers would stop my mother and they'd say, you know what? My child can have anything in FAO Schwartz that she wants, but your daughter thought about her and made her something. And I appreciate
Mm-hmm.
that. And it would make my mother bond with the other mothers.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So win-win, and then long
Completely.
down the road, I just started making jewelry. Okay, so back up a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. So
Okay.
I started dating this guy in Greece who had come to the
Yeah,
Twin
okay, yes,
Cities.
I heard you lived in Greece for 8 years. I,
Yes, I did.
you're an international phenomenon. Yes.
I would love to think that. But it just happened that I have friends, lovely friends that are from all over the planet. And one of my friends is Greek, and he had a restaurant and a bar, and it was very popular. And
Hmm.
so, if any Greeks came to town, they would all talk amongst themselves and hear, "Oh, I heard that there was this place. So when
Hmm.
Greek runs it, we have to go." And
And
so he would,
was this in the Twin Cities or
yeah,
in yeah, okay,
it was in
cool.
Twin
Hmm.
Cities. So he had this place. My ex showed up there with his friends. They all played soccer,
Hmm.
and he played for one of the Greek teams. And it was very romantic. Fast forward, we all fly to Greece. We're
Hmm.
vacationing, and I was wearing some jewelry that I made.
Hmm.
And a lady walks past the table, and she stares, and I mean, just really hard staring at us, right? Just, "Rah." And I'm like, "What is she staring at?" And so she comes back past the table, and she
Hmm.
said in Greek, beautiful, she goes, "Orea," and keeps walking. And so my boyfriend turns and looks at me and smiles. He goes, "You know what she said?" And I was like, "No." And he goes, "She said that's beautiful." And so
Oh,
she comes back past the table again and she starts speaking in Greek. And so my boyfriend he launches off. The two of them are talking,
yeah.
and he turns around, looks at me, and he goes, "Give me that bracelet."
Oh.
So I took my bracelet off my arm and I gave it to him, and he gave it to the lady, and she counted out 200 euros. And he gave me the money, and he looked at me, and he goes, "Go home and make jewelry." And that's how it started.
Ah!
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow, that's so funny. What a funny story.
so I
But
started
that's
selling jewelry in
yeah.
Greece. And
Hmm.
then if I went to go visit a friend, I get my friends that lived in just outside of Cannes. They invited, and
Hmm.
she told me, "I found different places where you can sell your jewelry." So they would take me by the hand, different places, like, "This is my friend. She makes jewelry. You should sell it." And so that's how I started selling overseas.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I was at a party in
Hmm.
Minneapolis,
Hmm.
and a lady, a very nice lady, she was a food critic,
Hmm.
and she was there with a very distinguished looking man, very well dressed, head full of beautiful gray hair.
Hmm.
And she goes, "Oh, isn't that jewelry pretty?" And I said, "Thank you." And the gentleman said, "Oh, that is lovely." And then a PR person walked by and she's like, "Look what I'm wearing." And so she had some jewelry on. And then somebody else walked by, they had jewelry on. And he said, "You're very popular." And I said, "Yeah, I
Hmm.
guess I sell jewelry." And so he said, "Well, do you sell it in stores or anything?" And I was like, "Yeah, some stores. I'm just oblivious to
Hmm.
really his line of questioning."
Mm.
And finally, he said to me, "Well, would you sell it at Macy's?"
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
And I said, "I don't like Macy's that much, but yeah, I guess." Yeah, I was
Sure.
oblivious. And that's when the food critic leaned over and she goes, "He's president of Macy's." And I just went, "Oh, well, okay, yeah, I like Macy's. That's cool." And he just laughed. But the next week we signed a contract and I started selling my jewelry at Macy's.
Oh wow. That's so fun. The coincidences. Luckily he had a good sense of humor.
I'm glad he did, because I honestly was not even really thinking. I was just like, nah, I don't, not really. Nah.
Yeah. But maybe it's like you're playing hard to get kind of or something. It worked out well.
I'm hoping that's what he thought, but yeah, I'm just
Yeah.
kind of sometimes really, I'm just, I'm blank. I did the same thing with Prince. He
Tell
asked,
me about that. Tell me about that because I saw this video where you were talking about how Prince was part of your inspiration to move to Minneapolis. Is that or really made you
it's
interested in
kind of
coming here?
true. I mean, Purple
Yeah.
Rain had just come out. It was this
Mm-hmm.
huge deal before it even
Mm-hmm.
hit the theaters. I mean, they were really promoting it like this was like the next god musical,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
I was living in Indiana. I was my first reporting job, and
Okay.
this gentleman, I can't even tell you his name, asked me out on a date, and the
Mm-hmm.
date was to go see Purple Rain. And I just
Yeah.
remember sitting in the theater staring at the screen, and I just said, I'm going there one day.
Mm-hmm.
And really didn't think much of it. It was just one of those things where you think, consciously, you're just like, I'm going there. It looks
Yeah.
so cool. I mean, it
Uh-huh.
looked exciting and vibrant and music, and it just looked alive. And Prince was everything back then. So,
Mm-hmm.
fast forward from Dallas to, Virginia to Dallas to Maryland. And
Okay.
then while I was in Baltimore, I started reading things about other Minneapolis bands. And then Soul Asylum hit with Runaway Train, which was a
Mm-hmm.
big song back then because at the time there were a lot of kids going missing. So they did that song and they were playing it
Oh.
at football games. And, I mean, it was huge. So
Mm-hmm.
these things just kept coming up: Minneapolis, Minneapolis, Minneapolis. And then
Mm-hmm.
I wound up going to a Josephine Becker film festival. They had just found
Mm-hmm.
all these movies that she'd made and they had restored them. And they're having a movie festival at the Baltimore Museum of Art. And so I
Mm-hmm.
went, and that's where I met my ex fiance.
Mm-hmm.
And we
Okay.
just struck it off and I mean, just fell in love. And I asked him where he was from, and he said, Minneapolis, and I'm moving back. Do you want to go?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yes.
Yeah.
And so I moved to Minneapolis and got a
Mm-hmm.
job at Channel 9, and the
Mm-hmm.
rest is just, honestly, it just kind of happened organically.
Mm-hmm.
I can't even begin to. I have to really think hard. It really was born from me wanting to do a good job as a reporter and me trying to find
Mm-hmm.
my place as a reporter in that town. There were so
Mm-hmm.
many different niche reporters, and I really wasn't in love with the idea of being a urban beat reporter. I wanted to know people. I wanted to know communities. I wanted to really just get to the heart of and the meat of Minneapolis because I could tell it was a unique city. It reminded me a
Mm-hmm.
lot of Chicago in many ways, but in many ways
Mm-hmm.
it had its own flavor. And
Mm-hmm.
the arts really gave me that opportunity. And so I had started doing arts coverage,
Mm-hmm.
and just out the blue, I got this phone call from
Mm-hmm.
Paisley Park, and they said,
Mm-hmm.
Prince wants you to come out to Paisley Park tonight. I'm thinking it's business. I'm thinking Prince has something to tell me. I'm
Right.
excited. I'm scared. I'm
Uh-huh.
nervous. I'd never
Yeah.
been to Paisley Park. It's way out in the suburbs.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so I'm, preparing myself. I'm going to get this big story, Prince, blah, blah. I get there. It's like, 10 o'clock at night. There's no one around.
Okay. Yeah.
They let me in the studio, and I'm just like, okay. I'm still not really putting it all together. I'm just there
Sure.
to do my job because I'm going to be a good reporter. I mean, I was
Yeah.
just that focused
Yeah. Yeah,
on
of
it.
course. Uh-huh.
And so they invite me in, and he shows up and he says to me very quietly, do you like music? And I'm thinking, well, yeah, I'm here, yeah, I like music, yeah. And he asked me particularly about this very old music show that came on in the 70s called Midnight Special.
Okay.
And it was this very crazy old guy named Wolfman Jack, talked in a
Mhm.
gravelly voice, and he was real hip and all this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And he introduced the biggest stars over the planet.
Okay.
And for
Yeah.
some reason, Prince had this show on a VHS tape. And
Okay.
he's like, "Do you want to watch the midnight special?" Okay. I'm just like, "Sure." I have no idea
Yeah.
what I'm doing here, and I'm up in this little apartment, that he has over his studio, and
Uh-huh.
he puts it in the VHS machine, and we're laying on the floor like little kids watching like this. And then
Uh-huh.
he turns around and looks at me and he goes, "Are you hungry? I can cook for you." And I was like,
Okay.
"No, I'm not hungry, but thanks.
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
still waiting for this story to happen."
Right, right.
And then I saw that that is not what's going to happen. And so
Yeah.
now it's like midnight,
Oh
you
my.
know, and I am still clueless. Shannon, I'm still
Oh,
clueless, right? And so I
yeah.
said, "Well, it's getting kind of late, and I really don't know my way back to
Uh-oh.
Minneapolis, so I'm thinking I should go."
Uh-huh.
And he just kind of got quiet. And I said, "Can you direct me back to the highway?" So he was like, "Yeah." So he takes me outside and he's standing there, he's like, "You're going to take Highway 5 until it reaches 101. And then you're going to take 101. And that's going to lead you to 55 and get back to the city." And I'm like, "Okay, thanks." You know, and I
Okay.
hugged him and I could feel him
Yeah.
tense up. He was just like, and I hugged him
Uh-huh.
and I got my car
Uh-huh.
and left. I thought nothing about this
Yeah.
until I watched Dave Chappelle do the sketch about Prince, and that's when it dawned on me. I was like, "Oh my god, that was a date," and I
That's
didn't
what I
know it.
Oh,
I
yep.
had no idea. But you know what? I think it's probably good that I didn't know it because he and I had a very good relationship, and he knew he could trust me and count on me. If he ever
Mm,
needed something, I was always
that's
there
good.
and always ready to do a good job and not embarrass him or not embarrass myself. So he
Mm.
was good to me, and so I don't really have any qualms about that, but yeah, I'm kinda obtuse when it comes to stuff like that. I miss it somehow. I just miss it.
It can happen. It can happen to anybody, really. Yeah. But what if that's a funny story. And then later through your I think through your 5 by 5 art, uh you helped to organize a mural about Prince in Minneapolis. Was that 2021, I think?
That was 2022.
Or 2022? Okay.
Um, and I was asked to participate as a judge, by, a business group in
Mhm.
Minneapolis, and, it was another lady named Sharon Smith Akinsanya and, uh, Joan oh my gosh, I could kick myself for messing up Joan's name at this point, but Joan is well known in the arts community, and
Mhm.
the three of us pulled together a list of artists, international artists that we thought
Mhm.
could do the job. You know,
Mhm.
one of the things that's really hard sometimes in doing a public art project like that is
Mhm.
that everybody has their opinion, especially in a city like Minneapolis, and everybody felt that they had ownership of who Prince was. And
Mhm.
so not o they wanted to feel that they had a say in it. Local artists felt like they had ownership of Prince as well because they're local. They felt that they
Mhm.
should have been doing the mural. But it really was out of
Mm.
our hands. This was a family decision. We
Yeah.
pulled the artists together. We interviewed the artists. We
Mhm.
made a selection out of a slew of artists who should
Mhm.
be on the list. And there were
Mhm.
2 locals, but overwhelmingly, it was about 6 other that were from around the world. And
Mhm.
the family made their decision. They chose Jairo Vega, out of
Mhm.
Miami.
Mhm.
Uh, people, it's interesting their perception of him because they felt more ownership of that than they felt of the Bob Dylan mural. Well, they love the
Mm.
Cobra mural and they all want to take selfies with it, and people come from far and wide. Bob
Mhm.
Dylan didn't live in the community.
Mm.
Prince did.
True.
He made his music in the community. He
Mm.
would light his little pyramid on top of his building, and everybody knew that was the signal to just get in their car and drive out there for a concert, free concert, because
Oh,
he
fun.
he wanted to test out his new music. You
Mhm.
may have to stand in line till 3 in the morning to hear it, but you
Mm.
got to hear it first. And because of things like that, because he put money into schools, because he bought transmitters for radio stations that were about to go bankrupt, because he
Mhm.
made housing deals with Rosario Dawson and tried to build new housing in Baltimore. This was a man who did for community, and he
Mm.
really did care about it. Was he eccentric? Yes, wildly eccentric, but he he really did care, and so
Yeah.
I think a lot of places, if the people feel that you have the same ideas, the same values, the same um, respect for each other and for where you grew up, they embrace you. And that
Mhm.
was really, I think, the secret for me for doing as well as I did in the Twin Cities and still continuing to do work in the Twin Cities is because I
Yes.
really understand the concept of community and what it means to be part of the fabric of community and what it means to create legacy in a community. And I
Yeah.
think I got that from my parents in Chicago, but it really came home to me while I was working in the Twin Cities and still do public art
Yeah.
work in the Twin Cities.
Yes. No, that is so powerful, and definitely community is so powerful, and so I'm curious about the transition into 5x5, or how 5x5 art consulting started, how it came to
Well,
be.
it was a time of transition for me. I think when you have a broader experience of living overseas and seeing more and meeting more people and learning about other people, your ideas change
Mm-hmm.
about what you want. And I had done a long time in TV, and I could feel myself being torn because, you're really a representative of a corporation when you're
Mm-hmm.
an anchor. And
Yes.
my station was bought by Rupert Murdoch, and my ideas were very different than my bosses. And
Mm-hmm.
having to work under a structure that I didn't feel respected me, my community,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm.
respected me as a woman. All those things. I started to become disenchanted, and I think that's really why I started traveling a lot and staying overseas and being in Greece because
Mm-hmm.
it didn't jive up. Um, and the new bosses were becoming much more restrictive. They didn't like
Mm.
so much arts and culture coverage. They were starting to restrict more of my time or keep me
Mm.
to things that were safe in their eyes.
Mm. Mm.
They would come to my desk and show me ratings, and it's like the ratings drop every time you do a Walker Art Center piece. No more Walker Art Center pieces.
Oh man.
What do you mean? No, this Walker is a huge part of the fabric of the Twin Cities. I can't just
Yeah.
not do Walker Art Center stories. So it started this
That's
battle,
silly.
and I was
Mm.
unhappy. And
Yeah.
that's really what it was. And basically, it came down to me having a few choice words and exit stage left. And
Mm-hmm.
I decided, I really needed to take a break. But during that time, a girlfriend called while I was down here in Santa Fe, and she said, "There's a job at the airport that you would be perfect for. You should be art director." And I was like,
Yes.
"Girl, please, come on. I don't have an art degree." And she goes, "I don't think that would matter." And so I applied for the job and stunned that I got it. But,
Uh-huh.
I think what they liked was that I told them, I said, "I'm going to make this an arts airport in 5 years that everybody's going to know about." And they were just kind of like, "Oh, okay, whatever, sure." But their mandate from upstairs was this has to be an arts airport. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of the commissioners were travelers. They were like, "I saw this in San Francisco. Why don't we have that here? I saw this
Mm-hmm.
in New York. Why isn't that here?" So they really
Mm-hmm.
wanted it. But, it's really funny what commissioners want and what operations wants. Operations just wants the planes to get out on time, that everybody makes their flight. They don't care about art. That's not a priority. So
Right.
you're coming in with one part of the building saying, yay, and the other part of the building's looking at you going, yeah, what? You're just something that's going to make my day more complicated, you know? And so I had to win those guys over, and tell them, you don't have to worry about us. We'll take care of ourselves. Drawing up emergency evacuation plans for art, telling them,
Okay.
your staff gets a choice. You can look and see what the materials are in the upcoming show. If you think these are materials that your staff doesn't want to handle, that's fine. We'll hang it ourselves. And so
Mhm.
once they started seeing, it's like, oh, okay, she's trying. She's trying to
Mhm.
fit in here. I
Mhm.
could see that they were kind of still hesitant. So sometimes I'd have to use some of those skills that I learned when I was a reporter in the South, which was
Mhm.
to, Southern women are amazing, that they are really these iron fists in a beautiful pink velvet glove. So it looks
Oh.
very sweet, but it's going to hit you. And
Mm.
I love them for that. And I would walk through the airport and just put my arm through one of the airport director's arms, and I'd stroll with them and I'd tell them, we're going to do this here. We're going to have a
Mhm.
show here. And I was
Mhm.
hoping that you would help me by doing XYZ. And they'd say, no, Robin, we can't do that. That's a violation of this, this, and this, and this. You can't do that. And I just lean into them and go, now, you've told me no right now, but I'm coming back, right? And we're going to talk about this again, right? So I learned to just kind of smooth talk 'em, and finally I get what
Okay,
I want.
yes.
So,
Yeah.
it turned out to be very fruitful. But,
Uh-huh.
at one point, um, honestly, I made a huge mistake. I took
Okay.
somebody through a gate that I shouldn't have taken them through, trying to get them to the plane. And
Okay.
I thought they had a boarding pass, but they didn't. So
Oh,
one
okay.
of the guys at security found out. I was like, don't get upset. I'll take them back through the right door. But by that time, somebody else had already called TSA and it became a
Sure.
thing. And it was just this
Mm.
huge mess. And,
Oh, man.
I wound up having to go in front of a whole bunch of boards and, you know, they dropped all these charges because they were just like, like threats of like terrorism charges. I was like, I just took somebody through a wrong door, so
Oh my, oh my.
it was
Yeah.
just too much. And
Ugh.
one of the
Yeah.
architects, I really bonded with the architects at the airport. They're amazing. How they can reconfigure space in a finite
Mm.
box is absolutely amazing. And I just love being with them. And my bosses would always tell me, stop hanging out with the architects. They're going to get you in trouble. Well, I want to get in good trouble. That's fantastic trouble. And so one of the architects told me, he goes, you really should start your own consulting firm because this is just going to be the
Mm.
same thing over and over and over again. Just you should do
Mhm.
it. And so I wound up working through one of the airport architect firms, and we
Okay.
were able to bring in more programming
Mhm.
during that time. And then
Mhm.
yeah, I brought in my replacement and I split. And then I
Mhm.
started doing projects in the community. It started out slow
Mhm.
because it was very hard for people to differentiate me in new careers.
Okay.
So there's always a lag time or just this misunderstanding of what was happening,
Mhm.
because things happened so fast. It went from TV to politics to art, you know.
Yeah.
And I was giving a presentation at a Federal Reserve Bank, and I thought it was a very good presentation. I was very excited about it.
Mhm.
And at the end, one of the directors raised his hand and he goes, "I'm confused. Uh, You're on TV." And I was like, "No, I love TV. I left TV 7 years
Shoot.
ago. How have
Yeah.
you not seen me on TV? I've not been there." You know? And so it was just this hard thing to get people caught up, and they would say that to me in the street. "I haven't seen you on the air in a while. Is everything okay?" Because I don't work there.
Yeah.
And
Mm.
there's a disconnect. People can't take you out of that box that they
Mhm.
know they're familiar with you in, you know?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
It would be like if you just radically cut your hair one day, didn't tell anybody, but you needed that change. You needed something for you, something that's feeding you.
Yes.
You're excited about it. It's a new change. It's new you. And somebody goes, "Now, you did have long hair, right? Now,
Yes.
why did you're just like, yeah, I did. I made a change.
Right,
So
right.
it
Yeah.
became very frustrating for me. And I'm
Mm.
sitting in the car after this presentation, and the phone rings, and it's this guy. His name is Jack Becker. He was the executive director of Forecast Public Art, which is one of the oldest and most respected
Yes.
art
Yes, I'm
consulting
familiar
firms.
with them.
And he calls me up and he
Mm-hmm.
goes, "I just heard you gave an incredible presentation." And I said, "Thank you." And so he talked to me and he gave me some work. But that's when I realized, I said, I have to leave the Twin Cities in order to get
Uh-huh.
people to understand that I don't do these other things anymore.
Mm. So what
And
year was that?
that was 2020. So I took a job in Southern
20. All right.
California as public art coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there 2 months
Mm-hmm.
and COVID hit. So I really didn't have a job. And it was really, I wasn't upset about moving from Minneapolis, where I'd been 20 years, to California. I
Mm-hmm.
needed that change. I needed to be
Yeah.
a new me in
Yeah.
a new world and a new job. And um, I just didn't count on COVID happening,
Of course. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and so
You
it
just
kind
never
of
could know.
knocked my feet out from underneath me. You know, I couldn't meet people and connect. I couldn't really do projects because no one's coming out the house. If they do, they're
Mm.
afraid to stand next to each other. You know, no one
Yeah.
wants to breathe on each other.
Terrible.
You know, so
Mm-hmm.
it was really difficult, and I could see my money for my department just shrinking because the city needed the money for helping other people. All I'm doing is giving out COVID funds to artists, online programming, and
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, one day out the blue, I got a phone call from back in the Twin Cities. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really how 5x5 started, because it took off during COVID, right
Mm-hmm.
after George Floyd. Um,
Yes.
and I
Mm-hmm.
think it wouldn't have gotten off to such a strong start if, I'm sitting in Southern California. I'm
Mm-hmm.
watching the place that I gave 20 years of my life go up in flames. I'm
Yeah.
calling friends, and they're telling me the most incredible stories, of watching it out their window, or they're being in the street with them, people standing outside their houses and seeing tanks roll down the streets, and chasing racists that are there,
Yeah.
causing trouble. And you know, I had a girlfriend whose son was very sensitive at the time. I think Gavino was like maybe 9,
Mm-hmm.
and the riots were happening right outside their front window. They were torching buildings, and so the thing that she
Mm-hmm.
did that she thought would keep him from seeing all that, she took a
Mm-hmm.
refrigerator box, put all his toys and blankets and his PlayStation and
Mm-hmm.
headphones, put headphones on him,
Mm-hmm.
and put the box over him until it
Mm-hmm.
was all done. You
Yeah.
know, so all that to say, I felt really compelled that I had to be there in some way. I was not
Mm-hmm.
there. I was not there at a time where I should have been there. I
Mm-hmm.
need to be there and do something to give back. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like the day after, I started putting together a town hall to talk about Black art in the era of protest. And
Yes.
yeah, and I got some major support from the Minnesota Museum of American Art and
Mm-hmm.
a couple of small businesses, McKinsey Ray,
Mm-hmm.
marketing firm.
Mm-hmm.
And we put together this program with a wide range of artists, Black artists in the community, some of the elders, like Takumba Aiken, who just won the Guggenheim Fellowship, and then
Okay.
up and coming artists, Roger Cummings, who has Juxtaposition Arts, Precious Wallace, who's a graphic designer. They were uh, multi-generational, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh,
Multidisciplinary, perhaps?
LGBTQA,
Ah,
you know,
LGBTQA. Okay.
and
Mhm.
so we had a variety of opinions and ideas.
Mhm.
Um, we had over 500 people attend across the US. Folks from the Smithsonian sat in on it.
Mhm.
And what pleased me really is that we had more than 300 students from Brazil
Mhm.
sit in, and the town hall was really used for curriculum at the University of Minnesota.
That's
And
wonderful.
so after that, more people started hearing about 5x5, and we started picking up more clients, and so that led to our first project, which was doing a project in, oh my gosh, it's a park about a block from where George Floyd was slain in the
Yeah.
central neighborhood of
Central.
Minneapolis, the
Okay.
South Side neighborhood. That's a historic neighborhood. It's one of the first neighborhoods where blacks could own businesses and homes in
Yeah.
Minneapolis. And so, to have that history and be able to do a mural that tied that history into it as well as the pain of George Floyd was really an
Mhm.
important first get
Of
for
course.
my company, and
Mhm.
it was really celebrated. So yeah, it started 5x5 and really started on its trajectory that it's on right now. And we do a number of things,
Mhm.
but public art is really the focus of 5x5.
Thank you. And the town hall that you mentioned, that is available on your website if people want to watch the recording of that. Is that right?
Yeah, it's on the website and it's
Mhm.
also on YouTube. It links to YouTube anyway. So yeah.
Yeah. No, I watched that. I just wanted to confirm that's what you were talking about, and I want and to recommend it to other people to watch it too. It was
Well,
really
thank you.
powerful.
It surprised me to learn that the art that sprung up after
Mm.
George Floyd, I mean, it's an amazing thing that has happened. Uh,
Mhm.
that it was happening almost 60 years to the day of the Detroit riots, and
Mhm.
it led to the creation of AfriCobra, or the Black Arts Movement. So,
Mhm.
it's interesting that these things happen cyclically, and what happens when we have these instances of strife in our country, or even strife in a community, that art leads the way in
Mm.
terms of getting people to have conversation and dialogue, as well as to heal. What
Yes.
what I do recognize now is that when the situation ends, who
Mhm.
heals the artist? No one.
Mm.
And so a lot of times artists lack the things that they need in order to heal themselves. Uh,
Mm.
we're working on a conference right now that will be taking place in August of next year at the University of
Mhm.
Minnesota.
Mhm.
And it's the World Conference on Remedies to Racial and Social Inequities. And it started out as a think tank about many different global ills that affect communities of color, whether it is mental health, maternal and child health,
Mhm.
economics, education. Just in the last 5 to 10 years, we've been really pushing for arts to lead this. And because we've been putting such an emphasis on the Twin Cities, we wanted to make sure that people were able to get out and really experience things like these murals. Lake Street in Minneapolis has become 5 miles of incredibly beautiful murals that really tell the story of communities, the stories
Mm.
of and the history of the South Side of Minneapolis, particularly going through the Longfellow neighborhood and then the Powderhorn Park neighborhoods. All those
Mhm.
neighborhoods are very central to immigrant communities, African American communities, very old Swedish Scandinavian communities as well, that
Mhm.
many of the businesses still exist there, like Ingebretsen's.
Mhm.
Ingebretsen's is a bakery that has been there since the 40s. So,
Oh, wow.
it's a multicultural community, and most people don't know that about the Twin Cities. They consider it either flyover country, or they just think it's all Scandinavian, and it's not. It has a
Mhm.
very large East African community: Somali, Ethiopian, Oromo,
Mhm.
um, Eritrean. and has a very large Hmong community, Laotian, Cambodian, Vietnamese, a very large Hispanic and Latino community. You know, you name the country from Colombia to Mexico. And so it's a vibrant community, and it's starting to show even more now since George Floyd. I think in a community that had already been struggling because of COVID, because of budget cuts by the city, a lot of programming like neighborhood revitalization programs were being cut. People were really left on their own to fend for themselves in many instances. And, you know, if a building was struggling, the artist came out and they painted it. You know, if there was something that needed, you know, to have some kind of atmosphere, there are artists that were doing landscaping exhibitions, or they were taking grant money that they got, and because it was COVID and nothing was happening, they put it back into feeding the community, or doing morning yoga exercises for seniors, or painting Black Lives Matter down the center of the street. You know, they took their time and their money to really keep the community going. And I I admire the fact that it's the arts that really lead the way in showing a community where it can go in the future. It can take people to show its own legacy. It can also be art for a safe space, a convening space, a creative space. And so, while people look at art as fluff or just entertainment, or you know, the various craft fair where they walk past and go, I can do that. No, you can't,
Yeah.
because what it adds to the community is invaluable. It's not just materials and you know, plywood or paper and paint. It's what it adds to a child's self-development, you know, your own community flourishing, to not just beautification, but to really show the soul of a community and the culture of a community. So yeah, I mean, I have very strong feelings about the arts. Because it's appreciated but not appreciated. It's expected to be there always, you know.
Right.
And so
Mm.
if you expect it to be there, you got to pay for it. That's just how it
Right,
goes.
right. They can't people can't take it for granted. It's important.
Right.
Um, and well, I know we're just about on time, but I do want to see if you have time to answer maybe this one more question.
Yeah.
Many of our listeners, I think, are artists, and
Mhm.
I know that you work with you serve and help like businesses and work coordinate with them and architects and you also coordinate with artists, and I know you have a database of artists and you offer services for artists as well. And I'm curious, could you tell us a little bit about the services and support that you offer to artists through 5x5?
Yeah, you know, we do some career counseling for emerging artists and mid-career artists,
Hmm.
really just to be that sounding board and to listen, because a lot of them have already gone through some of these processes. I had this young man, he's doing really great now. He just joined the Santa Fe Arts Commission and he's won Mayor's Arts Awards. But he was so frustrated. I just wanted to meet him and talk to him and find out things. And he's just like, I don't want to talk to anybody else. You know, I've gone through 30 applications. I didn't get any of these commissions. I'm just going to give up. And, you know, that's not going to do anything. Let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
it. You know, I can feel your
Mm-hmm.
frustration, but let's try to
Mm-hmm.
get you to understand why some of these artists are getting multiple contracts,
Mm-hmm.
how you have to understand how the public art structure works. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's a matter of really just getting them to understand the business of it. If we can place you with some place where we're getting funds, whether it's NEA funds, our town grants, or regional grants, you know, it's for a specific purpose. And sometimes you can use that money if the artist can have the same vision in that project. So a lot of times we try to do projects where we get funding. There's a
Mm-hmm.
group out there that they have an idea, they don't have the money. We
Mm-hmm.
will try to come together with you
Mm-hmm.
to get that funding for you, whether it's a grant or if
Mm-hmm.
it's a location, if it's
Mm-hmm.
connection.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just try to talk you through to see other avenues that you can have. strategic networking and cash flow. You know,
Mhm.
do I need to look at your resume? Do I need to just really give you a strong idea as to what your next steps are? If, it's
Mhm.
a lot of different things when it comes to artists. Um,
Mhm.
but I think it, it's most fruitful when you have a project like the project that I had at the Coliseum building. And the
Mhm.
principals are saying that they want to be a part of the community. They want to show their support. And then you can strategically network those artists that are looking for a place to be and bring them into the project as well.
Mhm.
And so that's really how some of the things happen. I keep a database.
Mhm.
Artists are looking for projects. I
Mhm.
know about a project.
Mhm.
Is there funding for the project? Probably. Then I'm going to make sure that the artist fills out the applications for these projects. What are they
Mhm.
looking for in this application? Well, let's talk it through. This is what they're
Mhm.
looking for. You need to give them back verbatim what they're asking for, but you need to put your ideas into this structure. So,
Mhm.
it's teaching them how to navigate public art, how to get that
Mhm.
funding, or connecting them with
Right.
the right person on the right project. Sometimes I don't even have to do a a, a call for artists, like an open
Mhm.
call. Sometimes it's an
Mhm.
invitational call. So that way I
Sure.
have my data bank and it's like, okay, for this project, it's going to be artist X, Y, Z,
Mhm.
A, B,
Mhm.
C, D.
Mhm.
And to me, those are the most fruitful projects where I have control over who's going to be in it, as
Sure.
opposed to this is a project that, you know, somebody wants and this is a specific artist that they want for it. Okay. So that's just kind of
Mhm.
functionary. But when it's
Mhm.
something that you can create and you see a bigger picture, you see vision for it, it's exciting. Like at the
Yeah.
airport, um, they wanted to do installation that really reflected like the northern lights and northern Minnesota.
Mhm.
And there was an artist that was a jeweler, but I knew that
Mhm.
he dabbled in three-dimensional kinetic sculpture. It was
Mhm.
just a matter of talking him into, because he's like, I can't do that. So building up their confidence. Yes, you can. I know you can do this. I've
Sure.
seen the work that you can do. This is what
Mhm.
they want. Think about it. Take us time to really think about what the themes of this project is and how you envision
Mhm.
it. And then,
Mhm.
you're giving somebody a new opportunity. Now he does projects all over the country in public art,
Yeah,
you know.
fantastic.
So, it's a, like I said, it's a lot of different things and it's a lot of different processes. It depends on where the artist is at their stage of their career. It depends on what the project is and can I bring artists, my own artists, into this
Mhm.
project? Is it something that, that we're working with nonprofits? We're
Mhm.
working with nonprofits and it needs money or they have money. Is there an educational component to it? Are we going to bring kids
Mhm.
into it? Do these artists like working with kids or do they have experience working with kids? It's
Mhm.
a lot of placemaking, uh,
Mhm.
really listening to people and trying to give them an idea of how to make an approach into new avenues in their career or
Mhm.
avenues that they're just starting into. Um,
Mhm.
and then we do other things outside of that too. We do a lot of interior consulting because there's a lot of folks that really do have art appreciation, but they just don't
Mhm.
know how to show it. So what we
Are
do
you
is
talking
come,
about like for example how you have your artwork displayed like so beautifully
yeah,
behind you? Uh-huh.
yeah. I mean, I did a client last year. They already had a huge art aptitude. They love color. They loved vintage too. They had an idea that they kind of wanted it to be a little vintage, but a little bit more like a southeast southern North Carolina, South Carolina kind of feel to it. So really taking their artwork and the things that
Mhm.
they already had, it was just adding to it in a more creative way and looking
Mhm.
at artistic opportunities to really recreate rooms in their house. And so we do a little
Mhm.
interior design based around with
Mhm.
that, asking a lot of questions, try to make it really
Mhm.
enjoyable for the folks so that they see that it's not something that's going to radically change their whole lives. It's just adding
Mhm.
to what they already have and just making it more them. Everything should tell a story about themselves. We do
Mhm.
writing, and so I do a
Okay.
lot of freelance writing. I write
Oh.
for
Ah.
Artful
Mhm.
Living. Southwest Contemporary magazine, was writing for Art of the West, Minneapolis-St. Paul magazine. So yeah, I write for a lot of different publications, fiber magazines, things like that. And I enjoy
Okay.
arts writing. It allows me to still do a little journalism and still
Mm-hmm.
embrace the arts.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of different things that I never say no to an art project. So that's what
Awesome.
five by five
And
is about.
sorry.
No, I said that's just what five by
Oh,
five is about.
yeah. And speaking of projects, what I saw that you posted recently about an art project that you have on the horizon uh about Route 66.
Yeah,
Is
I'm
that
working
is
on a
that is
project
that
down here, and this is for the
uh-huh.
city of Albuquerque.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my job as a public art consultant for the city of Albuquerque is we have a gallery,
Mm-hmm.
Gallery One, that we just opened 2 years ago. It,
Mm-hmm.
it took two administrations to get it done, but we have a very
Okay.
small gallery. And so we do rotating exhibits and we bring artists into the community to do their own work. But sometimes we get to do shows that we want to do. And this is
Mm-hmm.
one. Uh, Route 66 anniversary, the big 100-year celebration is coming up next year, but
Okay.
we are getting a head start and getting a lot of programming. We've been making videos that you can find on YouTube and re re-illuminating some neon signs with the help of local artists, which is very
Mm-hmm.
exciting. We've been doing some shows talking about what Route 66 used to be, and if you could have Route 66 today, what would the signs say? And so we've doing maquettes of
Mm-hmm.
Route 66 signs for artists to display in the gallery. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a real interesting concept about travel in the United States. And everybody
Mm-hmm.
seems to think that you could just jump in your car and it was the spirit of the road. And yeah, it did draw people in, the spirit of travel. The automobile was really in its heyday. People were finding a new sense of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
But for African Americans, that freedom was mixed with a little bit of fear. And that's always been
Mm-hmm.
the sense of travel for Black people in the US. And goes back to the 1850s and the Slave Acts, where
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't travel without having a pass, you know, and then it turned into Jim Crow laws where you couldn't eat in restaurants, you couldn't stay at hotels. So travel sketchy. You don't
Mm-hmm.
know if you're going to be safe on the roads just because you can't stop anywhere. So you either sleep underneath your car or you fall
Mm-hmm.
asleep on the road, have a horrible wreck, or you
Mm-hmm.
face, if you're going through the South on Route 66, you face the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan. So, you didn't
Yeah.
have a lot of options. And so this gentleman by the name of Victor Green in 1936 created the Green Book. The
Mm-hmm.
Green Book was based on the Jewish Vacation Guide, which started in 1917. And Jewish people also had the same issues. They couldn't
Mm-hmm.
go into a lot of New York and Pennsylvania Catskills hotels, but they were
Mm-hmm.
never told flat out, no Jews. They started to learn that there were codes and the front doors of hotels that said, you know, St. Leo's Catholic Church, 2 blocks. And you might see
Mm-hmm.
that on some, posts at old hotels. But yeah, that was just to let you know we don't cater to Jewish people. So, the
Mm-hmm.
Jewish vacation guide came up first, and then the Green Book, the Negro Motorist Green Book, came up after that. And so the Green Book just told you where there were places to stay, where you could eat, where you could get gas. So it was kind of a combination of a business guide too for local businesses that they could do their advertising in these. But there are
Mm-hmm.
also women's groups, women's clubs back in the 20s and 30s, Black women's clubs that
Mm-hmm.
also helped people locate homes to just stay in if there was no
Mm-hmm.
motel. So Route 66, I think there were only 3 hotels that catered to African Americans out of all the Route 66 hotels.
Oh
One of them
wow.
was the Dianza Motor Lodge, and it was a gentleman who collected Pueblo pottery. And so it was this probably not politically correct hotel today
Mm-hmm.
that had nothing but Native American artifacts all over it. and it was a place where Black people could stay. Other than that, you might have to stay at Kathleen Podrell's house, somebody who you didn't know, but
Mm-hmm.
she had rooms
Mm-hmm.
to let. You could stay there.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a 350-mile gap from Albuquerque to the next stop in Nevada, I think, for Black
Mm-hmm.
folks. So we trace all that, the history of travel, Black
Mm-hmm.
transportation,
Mm-hmm.
the Fugitive Slave Acts, the Jim Crow
Mm-hmm.
laws, and
Mm-hmm.
then when the first Blacks started coming into New Mexico, and those were because of the Buffalo Soldiers. And you might have heard
Mm-hmm.
stories about that in history that the Native Americans fought the Buffalo Soldiers. Those were all Black cavalry units that the U.S. Army
Okay.
created. And their
Okay.
jobs were specifically to go and clear out Native American communities. And the Native Americans, I they came up with the term Buffalo Soldier, and I can't remember if it's not Dene.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Apache that came up with the
Mm-hmm.
term Buffalo Soldier because it was the fighting style and the hair. They had
Mm.
hair like buffalo, so the term
Mm.
stuck, Buffalo Soldiers. And they were the
Okay.
first ones to put roots down after living at forts all over New Mexico. So some stayed, some came out of slavery in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
relocated there, built little towns around aquifers that good water sources. But when those water sources dried up, a lot of those homesteaders had to move on. So that's why you don't
Mm-hmm.
know about towns like Vado and Blackdom that were
Mm-hmm.
big towns. And
Mm-hmm.
when those towns dried up, they started moving further west into Albuquerque. They started showing up in Albuquerque. So
Okay.
that's how travel was for a lot of Black folks. And my
Mm-hmm.
grandmother, I remember my sister was graduating from college and we wanted to take my grandmother. And I remember my father having a huge blowout with her and stopped talking to her and he got in the car. And my mother is trying very hard to keep my father calm. And the
Mm-hmm.
argument was because my grandmother brought a bowl out of the house and he was like, "You don't need that." He was screaming at her because he was embarrassed. But back
Mm.
then, if we couldn't find a hotel that would let us use the restroom or a restaurant, my grandmother was just acting on what she knew. And she's like, "We have a bowl.
Yeah.
We can pull over
Mm.
to the side of the road and use the bowl."
Yeah.
But it had been such a long time, since she didn't know that. So yeah, that's our history. And so
Mm-hmm.
the Green Book tried to alleviate that. And so I have some apprehensions about this exhibit. While I'm excited about it, in this current climate, I'm
Mm.
curious as to how the city of Albuquerque is going to receive it. It's just about done,
Yeah.
and so we'll see because I have to go through a couple of layers of
Okay.
administration for them to approve it. So I'm sure that some of the didactics will get changed, some of the stories might get abbreviated. We have
Mm-hmm.
to take into a lot of sensitivities because this is a multicultural state. You want to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that anything that is put up does not offend different communities, whether it's the Dene community, the
Mm-hmm.
Hispanic community. You just want to make sure that everybody
Mm-hmm.
understands what happened during this time, and this is everybody's different perspective on what happened with Route
Yeah.
66. Because I think part of Route 66 actually went through the Trail of Tears for Native Americans.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, a lot of
Yeah.
pain,
A
and
lot. Yeah.
some of the houses that people bought along Route 66, Black folks, part of that was treated land that the government just went, "Oh, here, Black folks, you can have this," and didn't ask any Native communities. It's their land. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of damage that was done over the years through the U.S. government.
Yeah. That's unfortunate reality, but it sounds like an important story to tell, and I wish you the best of luck with it. It sounds like you said it's well on its way, and I wish you the best of luck with the final touches that you are putting on it and everything.
Thank you, Shannon. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
This is a great adventure. I'm really pleased with this phase, this avenue, this uncharted territory I'm going through.
Yes, well, you are just such an adventurer, and it's been so fun to talk with you. I think I could talk with you for hours, but I want to respect your time, and I just want to ask you if there are anything else that you would like to share with our listeners today before we close.
Um, Let me think. I
Uh,
guess just that you're your own
mhm,
best salesperson. You
mhm,
know best uh, how you can represent your art, your work. Uh, Never take no for an answer. You
mhm,
can always find a way. And I really do believe that you shouldn't look through the rearview mirror at your life.
mhm,
There's a whole windshield
mhm.
in front of you. There's an adventure out there, and you should embrace that.
Wow, such wise words from Robin. That last piece of advice in particular really knocked it out of the park for me. It just tied everything together and felt like the perfect way to wrap up the conversation and everything we talked about. And now, due to some technical issues on my end, I wasn't able to properly capture the end of my conversation with Robin, which was basically the last 5 minutes when we were saying goodbye. So I'm sorry about that. But I'm going to take Robin's advice and let that go and just know that you guys will still be able to hear all of the gold from the conversation, all of the nuggets of wisdom, and the interesting stories from Robin's life, and the great advice that she has for us. So, as part of that, I'm going to read for you guys my 10 takeaways that I have from this conversation with Robin. So, here are the 10 amazing takeaways from our talk with Robin. Number one, it's so important to understand what it means to create legacy in a community. Number two, do like the Southern women do. Be an iron fist in a pink velvet glove. Number three, people may try to keep you in a box based on what you did in the past, but don't let them succeed. Keep evolving and growing into who you want to become. Number four, art creates safe spaces for people to come together. Number five, in times of strife, art leads the way for people to have conversation and dialogue and to heal. Number six, art shows a community where it can go in the future. Number seven, art isn't just fluff or mere entertainment. It's more than the materials. It shows the soul and the culture of a community, and it is essential for a community to flourish. Number eight, as an artist, you are your own best salesperson. You know best how you can represent your work. Number nine, never take no for an answer. You can always find a way. And number 10, my favorite, don't look through the rearview mirror at your life. There's a whole windshield in front of you. There's an adventure out there, and you should embrace that. Thank you again to Robin for her brilliance, for sharing her gifts with the world, and for sharing her story with us today on the podcast. As I told Robin on the call, I just feel so blessed to have been able to interview her. It was a real treat for me, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Robin as much as I did. You can get in touch with Robin at her email, robin@fiveXfiveart.com. And 5x5 is also on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and YouTube. And so I'll put all of her information, all the links where you can find Robin, in the show notes as well. And so thanks everyone again for being here. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also to the podcast. And if you could please share this episode with someone who you think would like it, that would mean the world to me. Thank you again, and see you next Monday.